The world had turned to chaos. Rain hammered the ancient oak with relentless fury, each drop a tiny fist pounding against bark and leaf. Wind screamed through the canopy, bending branches that had stood for decades, making them groan like wounded creatures. I was deep in my hollow, curled tight against the cold, listening to the storm's rage. This was a night for hiding, for survival. The forest showed no mercy in weather like this. I pressed deeper into my nest of moss and dried leaves, trying to ignore the chill seeping through the wood. Outside, the tempest howled, and I knew better than to venture out. Only a fool would leave shelter when the sky itself had turned hostile. But then I heard it, a sound that cut through the thunder and wind, a thin, desperate cry. It was faint, barely more than a whisper against the storm's roar, but it pierced straight through me. My ears swiveled, straining. There it was again, a whimper, small, terrified, dying. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put. The forest was unforgiving. Predators hunted in storms like this, and the week didn't last long. But that cry, it pulled at something deeper than fear. Something primal. A fragile life was out there, alone, facing the full wrath of nature, and I couldn't ignore it. I pushed through the entrance of my hollow and into the deluge. The rain hit me like a wall, cold and brutal, soaking through my fur in seconds. Visibility was nearly zero. Water rushed across the forest floor in rivulets, turning familiar paths into treacherous streams. I scrambled forward, following that faint, persistent sound. The cries led me to a small depression at the base of a rotting log. There, half submerged in a muddy puddle, was a tiny bundle of matted fur. It wasn't moving much, just shivering violently, its miniature body convulsing with each labored breath. I couldn't tell what it was. A kit of some kind, no bigger than a pine cone, eyes sealed shut, utterly helpless. My heart clenched. This creature was moments from death. The cold had already sunk deep into its bones. I didn't think. I just acted. Carefully, I nudged it with my nose. Its skin was ice. I maneuvered it onto my back, praying I wasn't too late, and turned toward home. The journey back felt endless. Every gust threatened to knock us both down. Water streamed into my eyes. My muscles burned. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. This fragile spark of life depended on me now. When I finally reached my hollow, I laid the small body gently on my nest. It was so still. Too still. I curled around it immediately, pressing my warmth against its frozen form. My own heart hammered as I licked its wet fur, trying to stimulate circulation, trying to coax life back into that tiny frame. Hours passed. The storm raged on outside, but inside, a different battle was being fought. I had some dried berries stored away. I chewed them into pulp and carefully dabbed the sweet juice onto the creature's mouth. At first, nothing. No response. Just shallow, irregular breathing. Then, a twitch. The smallest movement. A breath that caught, then released. I froze, hardly daring to hope. I pressed my ear to its chest. There. A heartbeat. Faint, but there. I kept working. More juice, more warmth, more whispered encouragements that I knew it couldn't understand, but offered anyway. As dawn's first grey light filtered through the leaves, the rain finally began to ease. The creature's shivers had lessened. Its breathing steadied. It was alive. Against all odds, this tiny, nameless thing had survived the night. And so had I. The storm left the forest battered but renewed. Sunlight broke through the clouds in golden shafts, illuminating a world washed clean. But inside my hollow, the real transformation was just beginning. The tiny creature I'd saved, I'd started calling him Puddle for where I found him, was completely dependent on me. Those first days were a blur of constant vigilance. Puddle slept most of the time, his small body curled against mine. I continued feeding him mashed berries, drop by painstaking drop. Progress was slow, but it was there. A stronger suckle. A tiny paw that flexed. A soft sound, not quite a purr but close, when he nestled into my fur. His eyes were still closed, but his nose seemed to work just fine. He'd burrow into my warmth instinctively, searching for comfort and food. I couldn't leave him for long. My foraging trips became quick, frantic dashes. Grab some nuts, maybe a mushroom, then race back to check on him. After about a week, something remarkable happened. I was grooming him gently when his tiny eyelids fluttered, then opened. 2 dark eyes blinked up at me, unfocused, but alive with curiosity. He saw me, really saw me. And in that moment, something shifted. He wasn't just a creature I was keeping alive anymore. He was mine, and I was his. Puddle grew stronger each day. His fur, once matted and dull, began to fluff out. I noticed the color, russet and cream, with darker points on his ears and legs. His movements became more coordinated. He started exploring the hollow, wobbling at first, then gaining confidence. He'd pounce on fallen leaves, chase his own tail, and wrestle with bits of bark I'd bring him. The hollow filled with his energy. His playful nips, his tiny growls when he attacked my tail. But I also noticed things that puzzled me. The shape of his snout, longer than I'd expected. The way his ears stood pointed and alert. His instincts, the way he'd crouch low and stalk imaginary prey, felt different from anything I knew. Then came the day that changed everything. I was teaching him which berries were safe when a shadow passed over us. A hawk's cry split the air. Pure instinct took over. I shoved Puddle into the deepest part of the hollow and covered him with my body, every hair on end. The hawk circled twice, its keen eyes searching, then moved on. When the danger passed, I looked down at Puddle. His eyes were wide, but not with the fear I expected. There was something else there, recognition. As if some deep part of him understood what had just happened. And I realized something I'd been avoiding. Puddle wasn't like me. The russet fur, the pointed ears, the hunting instincts, he was a fox kit. The knowledge settled over me like a weight. I loved him fiercely, completely. But he wasn't meant for life in a tree hollow. He was meant for the earth, for the hunt, for wide open spaces. My heart ached with the truth of it, but I pushed the thought away. Not yet, not today. For now he was still small, still mine, still safe. Weeks became months. Puddle transformed before my eyes from a helpless kit into a sleek, agile young fox. His legs grew long and powerful. His movements became fluid and precise. The hollow that had once been his whole world now felt like a cage, and I could see it in his eyes every time he gazed out at the forest beyond. I tried to teach him what I could. Which plants were dangerous, how to read the wind, the difference between a jay's alarm call and a robin's song. He absorbed it all with intense focus, but I knew there were lessons I couldn't give him. Fox lessons, hunting techniques, the language of his own kind, those he'd have to learn elsewhere. Our routines continued, but with an undercurrent of inevitability. Morning foraging, afternoon play sessions where he'd practice his stalking, evening grooming as the sun set. But Puddle's attention wandered more and more. He'd freeze at distant sounds, his whole body alert. He'd stare into the deep woods with a longing I couldn't satisfy. One crisp autumn morning, the air sharp with the promise of winter, I made my decision. I'd seen fox tracks in the area, caught their scent on the breeze. There were others of his kind nearby. It was time. I led Puddle deeper into the forest than we'd ever gone, to a clearing where several trails converged. The scent of fox was strong here. This was their territory. His territory, if he chose to claim it. We stopped at the edge, where tall grass met dense undergrowth. The boundary between our world and his future. Puddle looked at me, then at the forest, then back at me. His eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes that had first opened in my hollow, held a question. I nuzzled him one last time, memorizing the feel of his fur, the warmth of his body against mine. He licked my nose, a gesture of affection that nearly broke me. I wanted to hold on, to keep him safe in my hollow forever. But love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. I gave him a gentle nudge toward the clearing. Go, I whispered, though he couldn't understand the words. Go find who you're meant to be. He hesitated. 1 heartbeat, 2, then with a grace that took my breath away, he leaped forward. Into the grass, into the trees, into his true home. The forest swallowed him in seconds, leaving only rustling leaves and an empty space beside me. I stood there for a long time as the sun climbed higher. The forest sounds continued around me, birds calling, wind through branches, the distant chatter of other squirrels. Life went on. But I was changed. I'd learned something profound in those months with Puddle. Love isn't measured by how tightly you hold on, but by your willingness to open your hands and let go. My hollow felt empty that night. Too quiet, but when I curled into my nest, I could still smell him there, that faint wild scent that was purely Puddle. And I smiled through the ache in my chest, because somewhere out there, under the same stars, he was running free, living the life he was born for, and that was enough. Sometimes on still nights when the wind carries distant sounds through the trees, I think I hear him. A rustle in the underbrush, a flash of russet fur in the moonlight. And I know deep in my bones that he remembers too, that the love we shared still echoes through the whispering forest, a testament to the power of compassion and the courage it takes to let go. If this story touched your heart, join us for more tales from the forest. Subscribe to hear about the courage, sacrifice, and unexpected friendships that make this wild world so magical. Until next time, may you find your own moments of grace in the wilderness.